A researcher in Botswana noticed something strange. An elderly elephant, clearly weak and struggling, suddenly broke away from her herd. She walked for hours, slowly, deliberately, in a direction she hadn't traveled in decades. The research team followed her. She walked straight to a watering hole, the exact spot where her mother had died 30 years earlier. She stood there for several minutes. Then she laid down, and within hours, she was gone. This wasn't a coincidence. Elephants have been documented doing this for generations, returning to specific places, saying specific goodbyes, performing what can only be described as rituals, and they're not the only ones. Animals across species do things right before death that science is only beginning to understand. Things that don't make sense from a survival perspective, things that look less like biology and more like awareness. When many animals sense death approaching, they isolate themselves. Cats are famous for this. A cat that's been living with a family for 15 years will suddenly disappear. Under a porch, into a closet, deep into the woods. For years, people thought this was the cat wanting to die alone in some emotional sense. But the science points to something more primal. In the wild, a weak or dying animal is vulnerable. It becomes a target. Predators can smell sickness. Other animals can sense weakness. By isolating, the animal is doing two things: protecting itself from being attacked in its weakest state, and protecting its group from attracting predators. A 2018 study on wild dogs found that sick pack members would distance themselves from the group during the most vulnerable phases of illness, returning only if they recovered. It's not that your cat doesn't love you, it's that millions of years of evolution are telling it, hide, you're weak, weakness is dangerous. But then there are behaviors that don't fit that explanation, behaviors that seem deliberate, intentional. Gorillas in captivity have been observed doing something researchers call visitation behavior. A gorilla who's elderly or sick will spend time sitting near each member of their social group one by one. Not doing anything, just sitting, being present, like they're checking in or saying goodbye. Crows take this even further. When a crow is dying, other crows will gather around it, not to help, not to eat it, just to be there. They'll sometimes bring food and leave it near the dying crow, even though it can't eat. Scientists call these crow funerals, and they've been documented across continents. In 2015, a researcher in Seattle conducted an experiment. She wore a mask while holding a dead crow. Weeks later, when she wore that same mask in the area, crows that hadn't even been present during the original event dive-bombed her. They'd been told. The story had been passed on. Crows don't just acknowledge death. They remember it. They teach others about it. They ritualize it. Here's something that surprises most people. Many animals, when they're close to death, stop eating and drinking, even when food is available, even when they're physically capable of consuming it. Dogs do this, so do horses, rabbits, and even some birds. Veterinarians see it constantly. An animal will simply refuse food in the final days or hours, and there's no physical blockage, no inability to swallow. For a long time, this was chalked up to loss of appetite, but recent research suggests it might be more active than that. A 2020 study found that some animals instinctively stop eating as a way to reduce suffering. Digestion requires energy. Metabolizing food creates waste the body has to process. When the body is shutting down, continuing to eat can actually cause discomfort. By refusing food, the animal may be easing its own transition. It's not giving up. It's letting go. Then there's the phenomenon researchers still can't fully explain. Animals traveling to specific locations before death, elephants returning to graveyards where family members died, salmon swimming thousands of miles back to the exact stream where they were born, just to spawn and die there. Whales beaching themselves in the same locations, generation after generation. Some of this is biological. Salmon are genetically programmed to return home. But elephants? There's no genetic map telling them where their relatives died. That's memory, that's choice. In 2012, a GPS-collared wolf in Yellowstone, clearly sick and near death, traveled 12 miles back to the den site where she'd raised her first litter of pups. She hadn't been to that location in over 3 years. She laid down inside the old den and died there. No one can say for certain why, but it's hard not to see meaning in it. A return to origin, a closing of the circle. Animals also show personality changes right before death that can't be explained by pain or physical decline alone. Aggressive animals becoming gentle, shy animals seeking contact, independent animals becoming clingy, or clingy animals seeking solitude. Case study on hospice dogs. Dogs trained to comfort dying people found something unexpected. The dogs could sense when death was 24 to 48 hours away, even in patients showing no outward symptoms. But what's more interesting is how the dogs behaved. They would become unusually calm, quiet, and physically close, not anxious, not distressed, just present. It's the same behavior seen in elephants standing vigil over a deceased herd member, in dolphins supporting a dying podmate at the surface so it can breathe, in chimpanzees grooming a dying elder even after it stops responding. There's a stillness to it, a reverence, almost like they understand what's happening and are choosing to honor it. Which brings us to the question no one really wants to ask. Do animals know they're dying? For decades, science said no. Self-awareness, they argued, requires a level of cognition most animals don't have. But the evidence keeps stacking up. Elephants touching the bones of their dead, dolphins carrying deceased calves for days, magpies holding funerals, chimpanzees cleaning the bodies of their dead before leaving them. These aren't reflexes, these aren't instincts misfiring. These are behaviors that suggest recognition, understanding, maybe even grief. We'll never know exactly what an animal experiences in its final moments, but we do know this. They're not passive, they're not just shutting down. They're doing things, choosing things, returning, seeking, saying goodbye. That's not just biology, that's awareness. So what do animals do right before they die? They isolate to protect themselves and their group. They visit loved ones one by one in what looks for all the world like saying goodbye. They stop eating, not because they've given up, but because their bodies know it's time. They return to meaningful places. They change in ways that suggest they understand what's coming. And in their final moments, many of them are surrounded by others who choose to stay, not because they can help, but because presence matters. Scientists are stunned not because these behaviors are random or chaotic. They're stunned because they're purposeful, deliberate, filled with something that looks an awful lot like meaning.